It's the first bit of kind of good news, at least if you're a Lucid fan, because for the month of August, they have slashed prices. Yes, unfortunately, this is only, as far as we're aware, a temporary price cut. I think that Lucid is kind of toying with the idea, and by making it look like a short-term thing, they'll probably make their shareholders feel like, oh, the losses won't be too bad on these vehicles, and depending on how many vehicles they sell with these new prices, they may end up continuing the price cuts, in my opinion. But for the first time, I think, in more recent history, Lucid has actually started undercutting the Model S, and not just hypothetically with like, well, one day we're going to make that cheaper model. No, these Lucid Air Pures are now starting just over $82,000 and technically get a little bit more range than the long-range Model S. And there's all kinds of pros and cons between them. Tesla's going to have the better self-driving technology and the overall better charging network, the better software, but the Lucid is going to have a more luxurious interior, a more efficient powertrain. It's a smaller battery pack than the Tesla, and hypothetically, if you find a reliable Electrify America station, you should also be able to get higher peak speeds from the Lucid, but again, that's assuming a lot from Electrify America. And the Lucid Air Touring got a like $12,000 price reduction. Now it's starting under $100,000. Still not quite as cheap as a Model S, and definitely it's not going to be as fast as a Model S, but from what I've understood, the handling and how the vehicle performs in turns is probably much better than the Tesla. But if you're just going for that, what's the fastest straight off the line, 0 to 60 time, the Model S long range is still going to win out. But the biggest price cut, probably most understandably so because it was one of their most expensive models, was on the Lucid Air Grand Touring, which got a nearly $30,000 price cut, which sounds like a lot until you realize that they were asking 154 grand for that thing. It's a heck of a lot of money, so I guess 30 grand ends up being around of a 15-18% discount. So now you can get a 500-mile range EV for only $125,000, right? Yay, that makes it sound so much better. But truthfully, if you're just going for range above all else, there's a lot of people that have been fed up with the Electrify America network and have been trying to sell off their old Lucids. And now that there's been price cuts for the new inventory, I imagine used Lucid Airs are now going to be even cheaper because they've got some miles on them, and of course it's used, so it's got to be cheaper than new. And it's not like we have any of that supply versus demand thing to worry about because Lucid has built, at this point, we've been tracking their production and delivery numbers, like over 1,000 vehicles that still have not found buyers yet. Lots of people were canceling their reservations, so clearly, at least in this market, there's not a ton of people willing to drop 6 figures on a Lucid. And that ultimately, I think, is one of their biggest problems. And it's kind of cool if you're a potential customer out there, I guess, to see these price cuts and go, wow, okay, the Lucid Air, which has some advantages over a Tesla Model S, but it's still going to come down to what you prioritize in your vehicle. But still, now you can get a Lucid Air for cheaper than a Model S. That's kind of cool, but ultimately, we know, based on Lucid's earnings reports, that these vehicles, even at their previous prices, which were way too high for most people, they still weren't profitable. Lucid was still losing a ton of money on every single vehicle sold, and they kind of found themselves in a really difficult situation. It was like, okay, we're going to keep building these cars, but no one's buying them, and we can't really lower prices because we're going to lose too much money. So there wasn't really a great avenue for them to go down, so I guess they just went through the whole, I suppose it's better for us to get rid of these cars and sell them at a massive loss, opposed to just having them stack up in our inventory lots. That's not a good situation either. But I think a lot of people now are going to be very nervous about the next earnings report and how this is going to affect the average selling price. And in return, that's going to affect how much money they lose quarter after quarter, which has already been a ton. And I guess it just continues to beg the question, how much money are the Saudis willing to pour into this dying company? Like, they're not anywhere close to profitability, and now they're cutting prices further. I wish there was some evidence that, like, the factory had found a way to reduce cost, reduce complexity, but they're not really saying they found any way to do that. And based on how the vehicles look and how high quality they are and how overkill all of the powertrain and battery pack is, I genuinely don't think they have found some miracle inside of manufacturing. Oh, this allows us to cut prices by 18%. No, this to me looks kind of just like a desperate move of, please, for the love of God, buy our cars. And that's probably why they're pushing the lease options so heavily now, because they're like, I guess no one has enough money for these things. How about you just lease them? That's really, really cheap in the short term. And maybe they're hoping by targeting like richer people that are more likely to do leases because they don't care that it's probably a poor financial decision vision, that'll get more cars on the road. But yeah, frankly, even with these lower prices, and I'm sure there's a suite of advantages between having traditional gear stocks, having the bird's eye view, having CarPlay, having that massive powered frunk. There's all kinds of cool perks to a Lucid Air. I'm still not going to recommend it over a Model S, simply because at the end of the day, what I think matters to the most amount of people buying these cars is the charging experience. And Lucid, out of all of the companies during this NACS transition, has been the most dismissive of NACS and has shown the least amount of interest in getting access to the supercharger network. And week after week, we still see evidence that Electrify America is unreliable, not consistent, and not as available or as well maintained as the supercharging network. And sure, the Model S is probably going to have spottier build quality and the materials aren't going to be as good as Lucid's, and you're going to have to deal a lot more with your gears and capacitive buttons and everything on a screen and a yoke or a steering wheel. There's some Tesla downsides for sure, but the Model S, in my opinion, is still the superior buy, even though the range isn't quite as good. When it comes to EPA estimates, the difference between 405 and 410 is like marginal. Like, you're not going to notice that with most driving. And it's great that the Lucid Air can peak out at 350 kilowatts and everything, but with the smaller battery pack in the Air Pure and the terrible Signet surges we've been seeing from Electrify America that result in the charging speed for the Lucids being incredibly low, yeah, I still gotta say, even though it costs more, the Model S is the better deal. And that's probably, if you're in the market for, you know, an $80,000 to $90,000 sedan, you're probably gonna be much happier with that, because you're just gonna be able to go on a road trip, plug in, it charges, it works, and you go on your way. The software is gonna be a lot more consistent, a lot more reliable, and probably get better software support than Lucid's getting. And you're gonna have a faster off-the-line vehicle. I don't know if you guys are onto the track all the time, but I think that straight off-the-line performance is what most everyday people notice when it comes to acceleration, and the Model S still wins there. And also, on top of all of this, if you want to talk about luxury versus cheap Tesla build quality, all Tesla's got the glass roof, and all of these Lucid Air Pures, which are over $80,000, all have a metal roof. How luxurious is a metal roof for a car that costs that much? Even the Model 3 doesn't have a metal roof anymore. Like, there's definitely some cost cutting going on, and I feel like the metal roof Lucids kind of feel claustrophobic. So I guess if you're just really, really in love with the Lucid, there's now a better reason to get one. But personally, I have very little hope now for the future of the company. If I was in charge of Lucid, I would be halting production and completely rethinking our strategy to market. I'd be focusing more on lower range vehicles with better efficiency, smaller battery packs so that they don't cost as much to manufacture. I would try to streamline the interior and try to make it more manufacturable and less costly. And yes, that probably means less luxurious, but I would certainly try to adopt the NACS port as soon as possible, get that supercharger access, because I think Electrify America has literally been a deal breaker for a ton of people who have bought Lucids or have thought about getting Lucids. Once they realize that that is a horrible, horrible charging network and that's all Lucid is relying on, they're not like Rivian or Tesla building out their own charge network. They're just like, yeah, EA's good enough. Yeah, that's a huge mistake. So hopefully they make some more drastic decisions rather than just price cuts, because that's only a short-term solution, and I don't think it's really going to sway over too many people. But what do you guys think Lucid should do? Feel free to let me know down in the comments below. And thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. So thanks again. Have an excellent rest of your day.